Each holiday that we celebrate in Judaism, each one of them, they have a hallmark to them, something totally distinct. And when you deconstruct, it truly reveals who we are, what we're trying to do in that holiday. So if you think about Hanukkah, you take a menorah, and you're not supposed to have it in the middle of your house. You're supposed to place it right up against the window, and you're trying to propagate, from the word propaganda, you're trying to propagate the miracle. You're telling everybody, look, there's this miracle. It lasted longer than we thought. Purim, you're trying to turn the entire world upside down. Because when there is pure evil in the world, and none of it makes sense, so you got to turn the world upside down. Traditionally, it's why people drink so much. They're trying to get to a point that they're so drunk, they can't tell good from evil. Right now, we are 1 week away from Pesach, from Passover. Now, unlike many holidays, this is one which doesn't really begin at sundown next Saturday. I mean, it begins when you sit down at the table, but it's the holiday of all the holidays that takes the most preparation. Traditionally, one is supposed to do deep spring cleaning in their house to get rid of all the chametz, all the food product made with wheat, with barley, with rice, oats or spelt, or things that will ferment. Ashkenazi, we kind of threw in corn because what if? My mother took the corn thing very seriously. Can I tell you about my mother, what she would do? I know some of you know what she would do. She's from Texas, which apparently has an entire different set of rules for kashrut. So every year she would sit there, she would clear the cabinet, she would read every single instruction, put it all into the garage, and then I would open up my childhood lunch at school in the brown paper bag, and I would have ham on top of matzah. Because according to Texas kashrut, ham does not rise, therefore it is kosher for Passover. And I still argue with her, and she still tells me I'm wrong. It's my mother. So our house, it was barren of any chametz. But really, if you think about what you're doing, you're stripping things away in your house. You're moving from the state that you're currently in into a new state. We are literally setting our houses as if we are back in Egypt and we are slaves about to be free. I mean, it's a wild tradition. We have the setting of Egypt, the most powerful nation in the world, the richest nation in the world at that time, and then we communally act out as if we are the very bottom rung of society. And no matter what a person's social standing is, the goal is to become like an escaping slave to match the diet of what they ate. If you are the richest person in San Francisco, your job in 1 week for an entire week is to embody being a fleeing slave. So what is going on here? And what is our tradition? What is it trying to teach us? So let's begin. Let's go to the setting, because context matters. This story, it takes place in the heart of Egypt. Egypt was a nation with unimaginable power, centralized into a singular figure, Pharaoh. Power and wealth was the foundation of the values of the Egyptian society. The Pharaoh was considered to be a deity. The Israelites, on the other hand, are the complete opposite of Pharaoh. They have no money, they have no power. I was speaking with Ron Herson the other day, and he made this astute observation about our current society and our current nation, and it reminded me so much of this story of Passover that we find in the Torah. In Egypt, they valued value. They did not value values. Israelites did not have any monetary value. What they had, and then what they would establish and codify when they left Egypt, was not value, but values. Rabbi Jonathan Sacks of blessed memory, he talks about how the most stunning thing about the development of ancient Israel is that the greatest transformation in moral imagination, it happens in the Exodus. In ancient times, gods were always on the side of the powerful, of the rich, of the kings, of the emperors, of Pharaoh. And we see this idea throughout Europe in the Middle Ages, with kings being considered divine. But then, we establish an entirely new world order, where God of the heaven and the earth liberate the slaves, the very lowest people on the planet, the widow, the orphan, the stranger. Where our two main characters in the Torah are Abraham and Moses. Both of them flee societies that are powerful, where wealth is concentrated among a few, but their societies lack morality and ethics. Now, by stripping away all of the chametz in our houses, it would appear that our objective is to become low, as if the way to morality and God is through being destitute. But this would be way too simple of an answer. You see, this moment is too foundational to who we are. It's quoted and reminded again and again that I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the grip of slavery. It becomes the foundation of how we see the world, of how we construct a society. It's not to become slaves, because that's not the message. See, the message to us is about Egypt. When you are a society that values value, this is what happens. It begins when the highest value in your society is accumulating wealth. Because as soon as a farmer thinks, you know something? I make money from that tree over there, and I own the tree. And if I want to make more money, then I probably should own the land. Because then if I own the land, I can plant more trees to make more money. And if I can own the land, it's not a really far leap to owning the labor that works the land. And before you know it, you create slavery. Why? Because human and values are not the value. Value is the value. When you think you own the fruit as if you are a God that made the fruit, you think you own the tree, and you think you own the land, and you think you own the person. When you forget that God is above all of us and there is a unification to the universe, you suddenly realize, I can't own a tree, I can't own land, I cannot own people. You see, we strip away at all that we have built up to be reminded that we are a people who value values and are not like the Egyptians that valued only value. That right there, that is what it means to be a Jew. That is what it means and what it has meant to live in the liberal world order since World War II. Our highest value as a nation was values. We believed in democracy, not just wealth. We stood with Ukraine because it was a nation that stood with our values, democracy, not because it made economic sense. Now, you only make decisions solely on economics if that is your highest value. America and Israel, we have been inseparable allies since its founding because it is the only nation in the entire Middle East with the same values as America. Literally, some of the streets in Jerusalem, the ones that I walk by every summer, are named after our presidents. One of the streets is called Lincoln. They can't pronounce Lincoln, that's how they describe it. Lincoln Street. There's another street called Martin Luther King Street, because those streets And that nation was founded with the same values as America. And let me be clear. The reason why we just had one of the greatest, if not the greatest, golden ages in the history of all of Judaism in the last 80 years was because of the liberal democracy was the norm where we all lived. Due process, law, free speech, democracy were all the values that were underpinned in America. And as a result, the Jewish people have thrived in a way we have never thrived in the history of Judaism. A society rooted in values is where we thrive. Now, when that is taken away, we have thousands of years of data of what that looks like for the Jewish people. When Tufts graduate students, Rumesa Ozturk, is plucked off the street with no due process for sharing her First Amendment rights, it should give all of us pause. And let me be clear, I'm not exactly a fan of hers. What she wrote and what she said at Tufts last year, it is arguably anti-Semitic. I don't exactly follow her on Instagram. But when the foundations of our democracy, when they're chipped away at, when the floor falls out from under her, we cannot be so simple and naive to think that those cracks will not eventually reach where we stand and we too will fall. We fell for thousands of years until we landed on this land, a land of values, a land of democracy. You see, Pesach is here to remind us that what we stand for is values. Now, there was a good Pharaoh at one point in time. Joseph, he worked for him. He was his viceroy. But the problem with that system is that Joseph was serving a man, not a set of ideals higher than the man who thought he was God. And eventually, a Pharaoh arose who did not know Joseph, and suddenly we found ourselves enslaved. What we develop once everything is stripped away from us is that we answer to a higher authority. We answer to the God of all humans of the world, and we establish a system of values to honor that. Our nation and our world are under the same threat that it has been under before. And Pesach is designed exactly to address this moment. Now, a critique of Pesach in this methodology is that it's focused on the what. It's focused on what the world should look like. It should be a world where human dignity is the highest ideal, but the fundamental critique of this method is that it's easy to say what the world should look like. It's much harder to say how should we get there? You see, the what, it represents the core values and goals of compassion, of justice, and peace. How we get there is much more difficult. But when we find ourselves in times of despair and uncertainty, where the values of our relationship with other countries are measured in percentage points, you see that you're becoming a nation just like Egypt, just like Europe in the Middle Ages, where values are absent from the conversation. So by simply stating the what and clearly articulating our values and our commitments when the how remains unclear, that is the core of our faith. We did this as we crossed the Sea of Reeds to freedom. We were not in Egypt, and we were not yet in the Sinai desert. We were in this perilous spot where the walls of water, they could crash in on us at any second, and it was in that exact moment when we decided to sing Mi Chamocha and to celebrate freedom. You see, even though we weren't there yet, it's an act of faith and resistance to celebrate a holiday that reveals the people of values and casts away those who only worship value. Without defining the what, there's absolutely no direction that we can work towards. For thousands of years, we have been the people who have danced in the midst of the sea, knowing exactly what the work should look like, even if we're not there yet.